gives you an idea of what it's like being in my head. Hey fiddlers, welcome to today's fiddle focus video. Today we're going to be talking about slurring patterns for jigs and how to figure out where to put them in a tune. You may never have thought about slurring patterns in your life before, and you could live a perfectly fulfilled, happy life never thinking about slurring patterns. Slurring patterns, I think, can make a big difference in your playing. You can make a tune more smooth and lyrical, or a little bit more kind of bouncy and peppy, and sometimes just by figuring out where in the tune to put them, it makes a tune a lot easier to play. Now, people approach bowing for fiddling in particular in all sorts of different personal, unique ways, and that's wonderful. That's part of the tradition. These are just some thoughts I have, and I hope they'll be helpful for you. Let's give it a try. So a couple basic things about jigs that are good to keep in mind. They're in 6/8 time, so that means there are 6 eighth notes per measure, and we tend to group those eighth notes into 2 groups of 3. So it's kind of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pattern. Also, a lot of folks tend to play jigs with sort of a jiggy rhythm. It has a little bit of a longer first note. The second note is short, and the third note is sort of medium. So it's like this. Long, short, medium, long, short, medium. Up to speed, that sounds like this. Alright, so those are the 2 things we want to keep in mind. 6/8 time and jig rhythm. Okay, so why does it matter what bowing patterns we use for jigs? We are free spirits here in the fiddling world. Nobody should be telling us what to do, but I'm afraid I'm here to tell you what to do. These rules are very much flexible. They're not even really rules, so take them with a grain of salt. But there are some reasons you might choose particular bowing patterns for jigs. First of all, the feel of the tune. Do you want it to be sort of smooth and lyrical, or do you want it to be bouncy and chunky? There are jig bowing patterns that can create both of those feels. Do you want it to be sort of smooth and pretty like this? Or bouncy and chunky like this? Secondly, you want to take into account, where are you on your bow? Are your bowing patterns going to make you run out of room on your bow like this? Or are you going to budget your bow by making up for lost ground, maybe slurring a few notes on an up bow after you've wound up at the tip of your bow? Third, there are some logistical things that come into consideration. Like, do you have a lot of repeated notes? Slurs don't work as well generally on repeated notes. You could put some grace notes in there, but generally you want those to be separate. So you want to go instead of. That's a little bit complicated. You can do it, but you might want to do separate bows instead. Another logistical thing to keep in mind is string crossings. This is a rule that I break rather often, but a lot of the time people like to avoid string crossing slurs. So instead of, you might go. And one more consideration is artistry. You want to mix up your bowings and have them sort of suit the musical feel of the piece. You generally don't want to get into one particular bowing pattern and stay that way the whole time, because that can just get a little boring and sort of relentless. Rather, you want to kind of keep things interesting. Okay, so those are all the reasons you might choose particular bowing patterns. What are the slurring patterns we're going to be working with today? These are just a few options. People have different ways they do this. First, there's separate bows. There's a pattern I like to call 1 down, 2 up, which means 1 down bow for the first eighth note, up bow for the next 2 eighth notes. You can slur each set of 3. And there are slurs that kind of cross the beat, so they go from the 3rd note in one set of 3 to the 1st note in the next set of 3. So let's try and apply these slurring patterns to a tune. We're going to be working with a tune called The Frost Is All Over, which I have taught on my channel. It's a very fun jig. The bowings I'm going to be using to demonstrate today are not necessarily the same as the ones in my tutorial, but these are some other options you could use. Fiddle tunes are flexible. You can do all kinds of different things with the bowing. So let's start with a down bow. That's usually a good place to start if you're starting on a downbeat. And it's actually really good to practice playing jigs with all separate bows, because you kind of get used to having a down bow on one beat and an up bow on the next one, which happens a lot in jigs. But we're actually going to start this tune off with 1 down, 2 up bowing. And the reason for that is we're starting this first phrase on the A string, then the next 2 notes are on the E string, the next note is an E string note, and the next 2 are on the A string. So this avoids some string crossing slurs. Again, not a big deal if you slur on a string crossing, but it can make it a little easier. You also get that down bow emphasis on the beat in the first phrases of the tune, so you get a little oomph there. Here we're going to try some separate bows because we've got some repeated notes. And right here we may be finding ourselves towards the tip of our bow, so we might make up for that by slurring 3. That was a slur on a string crossing, but I do that a lot. And then separate bows because we've got a few more of those repeated notes. Now we've got a pickup note, that A. Pickup notes we often play on an up bow. Right here we are going to mix things up a little bit by playing across the beat slur. So we're going to go down, up, down, keep that down bow going into the next note, and then we're separate bows again. So here's how that's going to go. Separate bows now. All right, and we have our bowings for the A part. Let's try them. 1, 2, 3, go. Of how you can mix up the feel of the tune. Here's the A part with mostly separate bows. It's going to sound kind of choppy and bouncy. Versus if I played it with a lot of slurs, here's how it might sound if we want to make it really smooth and pretty. Throw in one more bonus slurring pattern in there for extra credit, as if you're getting graded on any of this. This one is 4 slurred 8th notes, 2 separate 8th notes. So it sounds like this. You're slurring those first 4 8th notes, and the last 2 are separate. So it's just one other way to kind of smooth out the tune. I'm just going to do a very quick tour through the B part and we can figure out some bowings that might work well for that. We could do a few cross the beat slurs. Then we could slur 3 and separate bows. Then we could do the 1 down, 2 up pattern. Then we could do the slur 4, 2 separate. And end on a cross the beat slur. Just some possibilities. All right, gang, that does it for today's fiddle focus video. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, whenever I offer rules of thumb for fiddling, I want to make sure you're not getting stressed out about this. Definitely not worth getting stressed out about. People have many different ways of slurring jigs, and sometimes thinking about patterns and rules is just not helpful for people. But this just gives you an idea of what it's like being in my head. If you would like sheet music and practice tracks for The Frost Is All Over, which is the tune we played today, there is a link in the description for that. You'll also find a link for fiddle tunes of all shapes and sizes. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and happy fiddling, and I will see you in the next one.